The next morning started like any other. Lucy woke up early, ate a quick breakfast, and put on her gray hoodie. She arrived at her desk on Deck 7 and began reviewing the schedule for the Valari delegation's tour. Everything looked good. The tour would start at 10 o'clock. Visit the medical wing, the botanical gardens, and the observation deck, and end with a formal dinner in the evening. Danny arrived a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Lucy and sat down at his desk. "Big day," he said. "You ready?" Lucy nodded. "As ready as I can be." The morning hours passed slowly. Lucy tried to focus on her work, but she kept checking the time. At 9:30, she heard voices in the hallway. The Valari delegation was being led past the cultural exchange department on their way to the tour starting point. Lucy stood up and walked to the doorway. She saw Ambassador Torvin and Solani walking side by side, their ears alert and their eyes moving constantly. Behind them, a security officer was gently herding the 3 cubs along. The cubs looked less frightened today. They were looking around with curiosity, their little noses twitching as they smelled the unfamiliar air. The small female cub that Lucy had noticed yesterday looked up and saw her. The cubs stopped walking and stared at Lucy with those big golden eyes. Lucy smiled and gave a small wave. The cub's ears lifted slightly, and then she hurried to catch up with her parents. Lucy returned to her desk and tried to get back to work. But less than an hour later, everything changed. The alarm was loud and sudden. Red lights flashed along the ceiling, and a mechanical voice announced, "Emergency alert. Coolant leak detected on Deck 6. All personnel on Decks 6 through 8 must evacuate immediately." This is not a drill. Lucy jumped to her feet. All around her, people were grabbing their things and rushing toward the exits. Danny was already moving. "Come on," he shouted. "We need to get to the emergency shelter on Deck 9. Lucy nodded and started to follow him. But then she stopped. Something was wrong. She could feel it. The corridor outside was chaos. People were running in all directions, and the alarm was so loud that it was hard to think. Lucy saw security officers trying to direct the crowd, but there were too many people and too much panic. She thought about the Valari delegation. They had been on Deck 8, starting their tour. In this crowd, with all these large bodies rushing past, the cubs could easily get lost or hurt. Lucy pushed against the flow of people and made her way back toward her desk. She did not know why. It was just a feeling, a sense that something needed her attention. When she reached the cultural exchange department, the office was empty. Everyone had already evacuated. The alarm continued to blare, and the red lights made everything look strange and frightening. Then she heard it. A soft, high-pitched sound. It was almost lost in the noise of the alarm, but Lucy's ears caught it. A crying sound. A scared, desperate little cry. She followed the sound to a storage cabinet near the back of the office. She knelt down and looked underneath. There, huddled together in the darkness, were the 3 Valari cubs. They were trembling so hard that their blue fur was shaking. Their golden eyes were wide with terror, and they were making those small crying sounds that had caught Lucy's attention. The smallest one, the female that Lucy had noticed before, was pressed against her siblings, her little body shaking with fear. Lucy's heart broke. These babies were all alone, separated from their parents, surrounded by loud noises and flashing lights. They must have wandered away during the panic and hidden here because they were too scared to move. She knew she should call security. She knew the protocol was to report any situation and wait for proper assistance. But looking at those terrified little faces, Lucy could not bring herself to leave them alone for even a moment. She remembered something from her cultural training. The Valari were den animals. When they were scared, they sought small, enclosed spaces that felt safe. Warmth and closeness helped calm them. On their homeworld, Mothers would tuck their cubs into pouches of soft fabric to comfort them. Lucy looked down at her oversized gray hoodie. It was big enough to fit two of her. It was soft and warm, and it had a large front pocket. She made her decision. Slowly, carefully, Lucy lowered herself to the floor. She did not want to scare the cubs more than they already were. She kept her movements gentle and her voice soft. "Hey there," she said quietly. "It's okay. I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but I'm going to help you." The cubs stared at her. They did not understand her words, but they seemed to respond to her tone. Their crying became a little softer. Lucy unzipped her hoodie and held it open. "Come here," she said gently. "It's warm in here. You'll be safe." The smallest cub moved first. She crawled out from under the cabinet and approached Lucy with hesitant steps. Her little nose twitched as she sniffed the fabric of the hoodie. Then, with a small chirp, she climbed inside and nestled against Lucy's chest. The other two cubs followed. One by one, they crawled into Lucy's hoodie and pressed against her warmth. Lucy could feel their little hearts beating fast, could feel the trembling in their tiny bodies. She zipped the hoodie partway, leaving enough room for them to breathe, and wrapped her arms around them. Then she began to hum softly. It was a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was a child. She did not know if Velari cubs would respond to human music, but it was all she could think of. To her amazement, it worked. Slowly, the trembling began to stop. The cubs pressed closer to her, their little bodies relaxing. The crying sounds faded and were replaced by a soft purring noise that Lucy had never heard before. She sat there on the floor of the empty office, holding 3 alien babies in her hoodie, while the alarm continued to blare. She did not move. She did not call for help. She just held them close and kept humming until the purring grew deeper and their breathing became slow and steady. One by one, the cubs fell asleep. They were exhausted from fear, and Lucy's warmth and gentle voice had finally given them peace. The smallest one had her little paw wrapped around Lucy's finger, holding on even in sleep. Lucy looked down at them and felt tears prick her eyes. These little ones had been so scared, and they had trusted her. A stranger, a different species, someone they had never met before. And now they were sleeping peacefully in her arms. She knew that the search would come soon. She knew that people would be looking for these cubs. But for now, she would stay right here and keep them safe. That was all that mattered. Lucy Harper liked her job. She really did. Most people who worked on Unity Station complained about the long hours, the recycled air, and the fact that they were floating in the middle of space, millions of miles from Earth. But Lucy found comfort in the routine. She woke up at the same time every day, ate breakfast in the same corner of the cafeteria, and walked the same path to her desk on Deck 7. She was 28 years old, had brown hair that she kept in a simple ponytail, and she always wore an oversized gray hoodie that her mother had given her before she left Earth. The hoodie was too big for her, but that was the point. It was soft and warm, and it made her feel like she was wrapped in a hug from home. Lucy worked in the Cultural Exchange Department. Her job was to help different alien species understand each other. She filed reports, organized meetings, and made sure that visiting delegates had everything they needed. It was not an exciting job, but it was important. Unity Station was home to dozens of different species, and keeping the peace meant understanding each other. Her coworker, a man named Danny Vega, sat at the desk next to hers. Danny was a few years older than Lucy and had been on the station longer. He liked to joke that he had seen everything, but Lucy knew that was not true. There was always something new on Unity Station. On this particular morning, Danny leaned over to Lucy and said, "Did you hear? The Velari are coming today." Lucy looked up from her screen. "The Velari? I thought they were still deciding whether to visit." "Decided last night," Danny said. Their ship docked an hour ago. Everyone is nervous. Lucy understood why. The Volari were a small species, no taller than human children. They had soft blue fur, large golden eyes, and long ears that moved when they were feeling strong emotions. On their homeworld, they had evolved as prey animals. This meant they were naturally afraid of larger species, and they were very careful about who they trusted. For years, the Galactic Council had been trying to convince the Volari to join. The Volari had advanced medical technology that could help many species, but they refused to share it with anyone they did not trust. This visit was a big deal. If it went well, the Volari might finally agree to join the council. If it went badly, they might never come back. Lucy saved her work and stood up. I should go down to the welcome area. Maybe I can help. Danny shrugged. Good luck. I heard they brought their cubs with them. Tiny little things. Security is going crazy trying to make sure nothing scares them. Lucy nodded and made her way to the lower decks. When she arrived at the welcome area, she saw a crowd of officials and security officers. Standing in the middle of them was a group of Volari. They were even smaller than Lucy had imagined. The adults barely came up to her waist, and the 3 cubs that clung to their parents were no bigger than house cats. Ambassador Torving was the leader of the delegation. He had darker blue fur than the others, and wore a silver collar that marked his rank. His mate, Selani, stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the crowd with obvious fear. The 3 cubs pressed against her legs, their little ears flat against their heads. Lucy felt a wave of sympathy for them. They looked so scared. She could not imagine how overwhelming this must be for them. The station was loud, crowded, and full of species that were much larger than they were. Security Chief Ben Castillo was trying his best to keep order. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a serious face, but Lucy could see the stress in his eyes. He was speaking to Ambassador Torving in a calm voice, explaining the station's safety procedures. We have made every effort to ensure your comfort, Castillo said. Your quarters are on a restricted deck. Only approved personnel will have access. Torving listened carefully, his ears twitching slightly. And the Crixians? He asked. We were told they are also on the station. Castillo nodded. They are here for a trade negotiation. But I assure you, they will be kept on separate decks. You will not have to interact with them unless you choose to. Lucy knew why Torving was worried. The Crixians were a reptilian species, tall and powerful with sharp teeth and claws. They had evolved as predators, and even though they were now a peaceful species, their appearance was terrifying to the Volari. Just being in the same building as a Crixian was enough to make a Volari panic. Solani whispered something to Torving, and he nodded. Then he looked at Castillo and said, We will stay. But if anything threatens our cubs, we will leave immediately. Understood, Castillo said. Lucy watched as the delegation was led away to their quarters. The cubs stumbled along on their short legs, looking around with wide, frightened eyes. One of them, a small female with lighter fur than the others, looked directly at Lucy. For a moment, their eyes met. Then the cub looked away and hurried after her parents. Lucy returned to her desk, but she could not stop thinking about those cubs. They were so small, so vulnerable. She hoped that their visit would go well. She hoped that they would feel safe here. The rest of the day passed without incident. Lucy finished her reports, attended a meeting about upcoming diplomatic events, and ate lunch with Danny in the cafeteria. But in the back of her mind, she kept seeing those golden eyes looking at her as she was getting ready to leave for the day. Commander Nina Reyes stopped by her desk. Reyes was the station administrator, a sharp woman in her 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She rarely visited the lower decks, so her presence meant something important. Harper, Reyes said, I want you to be available tomorrow. The Volari delegation will be touring the station, and I need people who can stay calm if things get tense. Lucy nodded. Of course, Commander. Reyes studied her for a moment. You have a good reputation around here. People say you are patient and kind. That is exactly what we need right now. The Valari are watching us. They are looking for any reason to leave. Do not give them one. I understand, Lucy said. Reyes gave her a brief nod and walked away. Lucy gathered her things and headed back to her quarters. As she walked through the quiet corridors, she thought about what Reyes had said. The Valari were looking for a reason to trust them. Lucy hoped that she could help give them one. She did not know it yet, but tomorrow would change everything. 3 days after the incident, Ambassador Torvain requested a private meeting with Commander Reyes. The request surprised everyone. After what had happened, most people expected the Valari to leave the station as quickly as possible. Instead, they had stayed in their quarters, resting and recovering. And now Tarvin wanted to talk. Reyes prepared for the meeting carefully. She brought her best diplomatic advisors and practiced what she would say. She was ready to apologize again, to offer compensation, to do whatever it took to salvage the relationship with the Valari. But when Torvain entered the meeting room, he did not look angry. He looked thoughtful. Commander Reyes, he began, I have spent the last 3 days thinking about what happened on this station. When we first arrived, I was afraid. My people are always afraid. We have spent generations hiding from predators, building walls to keep the galaxy out. We came here expecting to find more reasons to be afraid. Reyes nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. And then the alarm sounded, Torvain continued. My cubs were lost. I thought the worst had happened. I thought this station, this place full of large and powerful species, had swallowed my children. I was ready to condemn all of you. He paused and took a deep breath. But then we found them, sleeping, peaceful, in the arms of a human who had never met them before. A human who did not run to safety when the alarm sounded, but instead stayed to comfort 3 frightened children who were not even her species. Torvain's eyes met Reyes's. Do you understand what that means to us? For generations we have believed that the galaxy is full of predators waiting to hurt us. We have believed that other species are dangerous, untrustworthy, unable to understand our ways. But Lucy Harper understood. Without being taught, without being asked, she knew exactly what my cubs needed. She gave them warmth and safety and kindness. He stood up straighter, and his voice grew stronger. The Valari Council has made a decision. We will join the Galactic Council, not because we have overcome our fears, but because we have found something stronger than fear. We have found trust. Reyes felt her heart leap. This was more than she had hoped for. Ambassador, I am honored. The Galactic Council will welcome the Valari with open arms. There is one condition, Torvain said. We request that humans be assigned as our primary diplomatic liaisons. Your species has shown us something that we did not expect. You are not predators. You are protectors. We want to learn more about this quality that you possess. Reyes smiled. I think that can be arranged. The news of the Valari decision spread quickly. Within hours, the whole station was celebrating. The Valari, who had been isolated for so long, were finally joining the galactic community. And it was all because of one woman in a gray hoodie. Commander Reyes called Lucy to her office that afternoon. Lucy had been trying to go back to her normal routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. People kept stopping her in the corridors to thank her or shake her hand. Danny had started calling her the Cub Whisperer, which made her blush every time. When Lucy arrived at the commander's office, Reyes was smiling. Have a seat, Harper. Lucy sat down, her hands folded nervously in her lap. I'm going to be direct with you, Reyes said. What you did 3 days ago changed history. The Valari have decided to join the Galactic Council, and they specifically requested humans as their diplomatic partners. They say it's because of you. Lucy shook her head. I didn't do anything that important. I just kept some scared kids warm. That's exactly what makes it important, Reyes said. You did it without thinking. You saw someone in need, and you helped. That's the kind of instinct we need more of in this galaxy. She leaned forward. I'm offering you a promotion. Head of Valari Relations. It's a new position, created specifically for this situation. You would be responsible for managing all diplomatic interactions between the Valari and the other species on this station. Lucy's eyes went wide. Me? But I'm just an administrative assistant. I file reports and organize meetings. I don't know anything about diplomacy. The Valari asked for you by name, Reyes said. Ambassador Torvine was very clear about it. He said his children trust you, and that means his people trust you. That's worth more than any diplomatic training. Lucy did not know what to say. It was too much, too fast. She had come to work expecting a normal day, and now she was being offered a position that could shape the future of galactic relations. Can I think about it? She asked. Reyes nodded. Take all the time you need. Lucy returned to her desk on Deck 7. The office was quiet. Danny had gone to lunch, and most of the other staff were in meetings. Lucy sat down in her chair and stared at her computer screen without really seeing it. A small sound made her look up. Standing in the doorway of the office was Kiri, the smallest Valari cub. Her parents were behind her, watching with gentle smiles. Kiri chirped and ran toward Lucy on her short little legs. She stopped at Lucy's feet and looked up with those big golden eyes, her ears perked forward hopefully. Lucy laughed and reached down to pick her up. Kiri immediately snuggled against her chest, making that soft purring sound that Lucy had come to love. Torvine and Solani approached. She would not stop asking about you, Solani said. She wanted to see the warm human with the soft den. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. She's welcome here anytime. Torvine nodded. We hoped you would say that. We also hoped you would accept the position that Commander Reyes offered. Our people need someone like you. Someone who sees us not as strange aliens, but as families with children who need protecting. Lucy looked down at Kiri, who was already half asleep in her arms. She thought about all the things she had learned in the past few days. She thought about fear and trust and kindness. She thought about a galaxy full of species who had been taught to see each other as threats. Maybe she could help change that. Maybe she could show them what she had shown 3 scared cubs in an empty office. That sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe was a warm embrace and a gentle voice. Okay, Lucy said. I'll do it. Torvine's ears lifted with joy. Thank you, Lucy Harper. You will not regret this. Lucy smiled and looked down at Kiri. I know I won't. A week later, Lucy moved into her new office on Deck 5. It was bigger than her old desk, with windows that looked out at the stars. But she kept her old gray hoodie, and she kept a soft blanket in the corner for visiting cubs. And visit they did. Every time a Valari delegation came to the station, the cubs found their way to Deck 5. They would climb into Lucy's lap and fall asleep while she worked, their purring mixing with the soft hum of the station. Security Chief Castillo stopped by one day and found Lucy typing a report with 2 cubs asleep in her hood and 1 on her lap. He shook his head and laughed. I'm going to have to update the station protocols to include a section on human hoodie diplomacy. Lucy grinned up at him. You probably should. And in that moment, surrounded by sleeping cubs and the vast beauty of space, Lucy Harper knew she had found exactly where she belonged. On Deck 9, the emergency shelter was filled with worried faces. Hundreds of people from the evacuated decks had gathered there, waiting for news about the coolant leak. Security officers moved through the crowd, trying to keep everyone calm and organized. Ambassador Torvine stood near the entrance. his golden eyes scanning every face that came through the door. Salani was beside him, her ears pressed flat against her head, her whole body trembling. They had been on the observation deck when the alarm sounded, and in the rush to evacuate, they had lost sight of their cub's dot at first. They thought the cubs were with the security officer who had been watching them. But when they reached the shelter, the officer was alone. He said the cubs had been right behind him, but somewhere in the crowd, they had disappeared. Salani made a sound that needed no translation. It was the cry of a mother who had lost her children. She clutched at Torvin's arm, her small body shaking with fear and grief. Security Chief Ben Castillo arrived within minutes of being told about the missing cubs. His face was pale but determined. He understood what was at stake. If those cubs were not found safe and sound, there would be consequences far beyond this station. "Lock down all decks," Castillo ordered. "No one enters or leaves the station until those cubs are found. I want every available officer searching." The search began immediately. Teams of security officers spread out across the station, checking every room, every corridor, every hiding place they could think of. The coolant leak had been contained quickly, so the evacuated decks were now safe to enter. But that did not make the search any easier. Unity Station was enormous, with hundreds of rooms and thousands of places where 3 small cubs could hide. Commander Nina Reyes arrived at the shelter and went directly to the Volari delegation. She tried to reassure them, but Torvin was beyond comfort. "Our children are out there alone," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "They are small and frightened. They do not know this station. They do not know these people. We will find them," Reyes said firmly. "I promise you, Ambassador. Every person on this station is looking for them right now." But Torvin was not convinced. His eyes moved to the group of Crixians who were standing on the other side of the shelter. The reptilian aliens had been evacuated along with everyone else, and they were watching the scene with quiet interest. "What about them?" Torvin asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Crixians. They are predators. What if they found our cubs first?" Reyes shook her head. "The Crixians have been accounted for. They were all on deck 4 when the alarm sounded, and they came directly here. They have not been near your cubs." But Torvin did not look reassured. Salani buried her face in his chest, unable to watch anymore. Across the room, the Crixian delegate, a large male named Vrax, watched the Volari with what might have been concern. He turned to his aide and spoke in a low voice. Then he walked toward Commander Reyes. "We wish to help," Vrax said. His voice was deep and rough, but his tone was gentle. "We have better senses than humans. We can smell and hear things that your people cannot. Let us join the search." Reyes hesitated. She knew that having Crixians search for Volari cubs was a complicated situation. The Volari were already terrified. Seeing their ancient predators hunting for their children might push them over the edge. But before she could respond, Torvin spoke. "No," he said firmly. "Keep them away from our cubs." Vrax's yellow eyes flickered with something that might have been hurt, but he nodded and stepped back. "We understand," he said. "But if you change your mind, we are here." The search continued. Officer Jake Marino and his partner, Officer Katie Lane, were assigned to Deck 7. They moved through the corridors methodically, checking every room, looking under every desk, opening every closet. "Those poor little things," Katie said as they searched. "They must be so scared." Jake nodded. "Yeah, I hope we find them soon." The parents look like they're about to fall apart. They had searched most of Deck 7 without finding anything. The offices were empty, the storage rooms were clear, and there was no sign of the cubs anywhere. Jake was starting to wonder if maybe the cubs had found their way to a different deck. Then Katie stopped. "Wait," she said. "What about the Cultural Exchange Department?" We haven't checked there yet. Jake looked at his tablet. Records show it was evacuated with everyone else. But you're right, we should check. They made their way to the Cultural Exchange Department. The door was open and the lights were still on. The office looked empty at first glance. Desks, chairs, computers, all abandoned in the rush to evacuate. But Jake noticed something. One desk in the corner was occupied. Someone was sitting there, perfectly still, their back to the door. "Hello?" Jake called out. "This deck was evacuated. You need to come with us." The person did not move. Jake and Katie exchanged a look and walked closer as they approached. Jake saw that it was a young woman in an oversized gray hoodie. She was sitting at her desk with her hands folded in front of her, and she was looking at them with calm eyes. "Ma'am," Jake said, "didn't you hear the evacuation order? You need to come to the emergency shelter." The woman raised a single finger to her lips. The universal sign for silence. Jake stopped. He did not understand. Why would she want him to be quiet? Why was she sitting here alone in an evacuated office? Then he heard it. A soft sound coming from beneath her hoodie. A gentle purring noise, like a cat sleeping in a warm spot. He looked closer and saw that her hoodie was bulging strangely. It was too big, too full. Something was inside it. The woman slowly unzipped her hoodie just enough for Jake to see. And there, nestled against her chest, were 3 small blue shapes. 3 Velari cubs curled up together, fast asleep. Their little ears were relaxed, their tiny paws were twitching with dreams, and their breathing was slow and peaceful. Jake's eyes went wide. He reached for his communicator, his hands trembling. He looked at Katie, who had her hand over her mouth in shock. "Chief Castillo," Jake whispered into the communicator. "This is Officer Marino. Deck 7, Cultural Exchange Department. We found them. We found the cubs. They're safe. They're sleeping. You need to get the parents here now." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Castillo's voice came through, thick with relief. "On our way." Jake looked at the woman in the gray hoodie. She smiled at him and went back to watching over the sleeping cubs, her hand resting gently on the small shapes beneath the fabric. The news spread through Unity Station like wildfire. The cubs had been found. They were safe. They were sleeping in the emergency shelter. Ambassador Torvine heard the words from Commander Reyes, and for a moment he could not move. His legs felt weak, his heart was pounding, and his eyes were filling with tears he could not stop. Beside him, Solani let out a sob of relief and grabbed his arm. "Where?" Torvine managed to ask. "Where are they?" "Deck 7, Reyes said. "The Cultural Exchange Department. One of our staff members found them and kept them safe." Torvine did not wait for more explanation. He took Seleni's hand and rushed toward the door. Security officers cleared a path for them, and Reyes hurried to keep up. Behind them, the entire shelter had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The walk to Deck 7 felt like the longest journey of Torvine's life. Every step was torture. He needed to see his cubs. He needed to hold them in his arms and know that they were really safe. When they reached the Cultural Exchange Department, Torvine stopped at the doorway. His breath caught in his chest. There, sitting at a desk in the corner of the room, was a human female. She was young, with brown hair pulled back in a simple style, and she was wearing an oversized gray garment that humans called a hoodie. She was sitting very still, her hands resting on the desk, and she was watching the door with calm, patient eyes. But what made Torvine freeze was what he saw beneath her hoodie. 3 small shapes were visible through the fabric, rising and falling with slow, peaceful breaths. He could hear the purring sound that Velari cubs made when they felt completely safe. It was a sound he had not expected to hear on this station, surrounded by strangers. Solani pushed past him and ran to the desk. She dropped to her knees beside the human, her golden eyes fixed on the sleeping cubs. Her hands were shaking as she reached toward them, but she stopped herself. She did not want to wake them. "My babies," Solani whispered. "My little ones." The human woman looked at Solani with gentle eyes. Slowly, carefully, she unzipped her hoodie and opened it wider. The 3 cubs were curled up against her chest, their blue fur pressed against the soft fabric of her clothing. They were holding on to each other, and the smallest one was holding on to the human's finger. Solani began to cry. She had been so scared. She had imagined the worst things. She had thought she might never see her children again. And here they were, sleeping peacefully in the arms of a stranger. Torvin approached slowly. He looked at the human, studying her face. She was not threatening. She was not proud or demanding. She was simply sitting there, keeping his children warm, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "How?" Torvin asked. His voice was hoarse with emotion. "How did you calm them? Our cubs do not trust strangers. They have never slept in the presence of anyone outside our family." The human thought for a moment before answering. "I found them hiding under a cabinet," she said. "They were so scared. The alarm was loud, and there were so many people running. I think they just wanted to feel safe." She paused and looked down at the sleeping cubs. "I remembered from my training that Velari cubs like warmth and enclosed spaces. My hoodie is pretty big, so I thought maybe they would feel better inside it. I talked to them and sang to them until they stopped shaking. And then they just fell asleep." Torvin did not know what to say. On his homeworld, allowing someone outside the family to hold your cubs was an incredible act of trust. Cubs were precious. They were vulnerable. You did not let just anyone near them. But his cubs had chosen this human. They had crawled into her arms and fallen asleep. They had trusted her with their lives. Solani reached into the hoodie and gently lifted out the smallest cub. The little one stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw her mother, she made a happy chirping sound and nuzzled against her. One by one, the cubs were transferred to their parents. The 2 larger ones went to Torvin, who held them close and pressed his face against their soft fur. Solani cradled the smallest one, tears streaming down her face. But the smallest cub, the female named Kiri, did not want to leave entirely. She kept looking back at the human, her golden eyes wide and searching. She chirped and reached out one tiny paw toward the gray hoodie. The human smiled and gently touched Kiri's paw. "It's okay," she said softly. "You go with your mom. I'll see you again." Kiri chirped once more and then settled into Seleni's arms. Finally content. Commander Reyes, who had been standing in the doorway watching everything, stepped forward. "Ambassador Torvin," she said, "I am deeply sorry that this happened. The safety of your family should have been our highest priority, and we failed." Torvin looked at her, then looked at the human woman who was still sitting at her desk. "You did not fail," he said slowly. "Not completely. One of your people saved my children." He turned to the human. "What is your name?" "Lucy Harper," she said. Torvin nodded. He would remember that name for the rest of his life. "Lucy Harper," he repeated. "On behalf of the Velari people, I thank you. What you did today means more than you can possibly understand. You did not just save 3 cubs. You changed everything." Lucy looked embarrassed. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "Anyone would have done the same." But Torvin shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone. Not everyone has the kindness to see scared children and put their needs above everything else. Not everyone has the patience to sit and wait while the whole station searches. You are special, Lucy Harper. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Lucy did not know what to say. She felt her face growing warm with embarrassment. She was not used to being praised. She was just an administrative assistant. She just did what felt right. Solani approached Lucy and did something unexpected. She reached out and took Lucy's hand in her own small, furry fingers. She held it for a moment, looking into Lucy's eyes. "Thank you," Solani said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more emotion than any shout could hold. "You saved my heart today." Lucy squeezed Solani's hand gently. "They're beautiful children," she said. "I'm glad I could help." Security Chief Castillo cleared his throat. "We should probably get the family back to their quarters," he said. "Let them rest and recover." Torvi nodded, but before he left, he turned to look at Lucy one more time. There was something in his eyes that had not been there before. It looked like hope. "We will speak again," he said. Soon. Then the Valari delegation was escorted away, the cubs safe in their parents' arms. Lucy watched them go, her heart full of emotions she could not name. She looked down at her hoodie. It was wrinkled and covered in blue fur. She smiled and did not even think about cleaning it off.